There's a silence that speaks louder than words. A pause, a gap, an absence that echoes in the air like a whisper with weight. And in that silence, someone is being remembered relentlessly. Not because she's weak, not because she's unsure, but because she knows the power of holding herself back. Let's make something clear right now. Connection does not require constant contact. The most unforgettable people aren't the ones who flood the inbox or chase the attention. They are the ones who made an impression so deep their absence becomes more provocative than presence. If she's not calling, if she's not texting, if she's not reaching out, don't be fooled.
That's not disinterest. That's strength. That's poise.
That's self-control woven with undeniable desire. She's thinking, not impulsively reacting. She's remembering, not rehashing. She's pulling herself inward, not because she's over it, but because she knows how to feel without begging to be seen. This isn't a game. This is emotional intelligence. And that intelligence tells her, desire is not proven through pursuit. It's proven through presence, even in absence. She replays moments like snapshots, not because she needs validation, but because they mattered. The way the words were said, the way the energy shifted in a room. The subtle glance, the restrained touch, the unspoken invitation laced between two beating hearts. She remembers all of it, and it hits her at night when the world quiets down. When there's no one watching, no one expecting.
No one pretending.
That's when her thoughts drift back, not to noise, not to drama, not to convenience, but to connection. To intimacy that moved beyond the physical. To the feeling she thought was safe, but turned out to be seismic. And yet, she doesn't reach out. Because she knows what it means to give space for desire to grow. She knows silence isn't emptiness. It's clarity. It's power. It's restraint. Her worth isn't tied to proximity. It's not measured in messages or meetings or midnight confessions. Her worth is felt in how long she lingers in your memory, uninvited, unannounced, yet undeniable. And when you wonder why you still feel her, when you question how someone can be so silent yet so present, it's because she was never just a moment. She was a shift, a force, a resonance. That's what happens when someone shows up with intention and then lets the echo do the talking. So don't mistake her stillness for forgetfulness. She's not erasing. She's not deleting. She's not moving on. She's integrating, processing, reflecting. And every night, before her eyes close, she replays what was, not to rewind it, not to rewrite it, but to feel it fully on her terms. Because when someone carries depth, they don't need to chase validation. They become unforgettable by simply being true to themselves. So if you ever feel her presence in the silence, you're not imagining it. You're feeling what it's like to be remembered by someone who refuses to betray her dignity. Now, here's your challenge. Don't react, rise. Don't chase, elevate.
Step into your power.
Live in such a way that your presence inspires remembrance.
Not because you reached out,
but because you reached within and became someone who never has to beg to be felt. Be the one who lingers, not in messages, but in memory. What if silence isn't the absence of love, but the expression of it? What if the very act of not reaching out is a kind of devotion, a form of sacred restraint? We've been conditioned to think intimacy is proven through action, calls, messages, confessions. But in truth, real intimacy often speaks through the unspoken. Through the pause, through the stillness that presses into your skin and lingers. Silence, when it comes from a woman of depth, is not empty. It's loaded, charged, erotic. There's something profoundly seductive about not knowing exactly what's going on in her mind, but sensing that you're there, occupying a quiet corner. It's the tension of it, the uncertainty, the craving to hear from her, and the ache that grows when she doesn't make the move you expect. And the paradox is this, the more she holds back, the more your attention leans in. That's not a game. That's instinct. That's what happens when someone doesn't pour their energy out recklessly, but instead pulls it inward, letting it intensify until it hums beneath the surface. You don't need to be in her bed to know she's replaying a moment in her head. Maybe the way your eyes locked. Maybe the brush of your arm against hers. Maybe the way your voice changed in a moment of vulnerability. She isn't texting you about it. She isn't flooding your notifications, but she's remembering. She's reliving. And in those memories, she feels what she's not saying. That's intimacy. When someone can evoke emotion without touching you, without even speaking, it's energy. Raw, still, real. This kind of silence isn't passive. It's potent. It's her choosing not to fill the space with noise. It's her way of controlling the frequency between you. She knows that desire builds in mystery. She knows that too many words dilute meaning. She understands that presence doesn't always require presence. She can feel someone deeply and still stay, and that inner stillness is where her power lives. Because when a woman is silent but connected, the silence becomes a sensual space, a private room between two hearts. She's not ghosting. She's glowing internally. She's checking in with herself before she checks in with anyone else. That's emotional sovereignty. And it's magnetic. You might scroll through old messages or wonder why she hasn't said anything, but deep down, you know she's not gone. She's there. She's just choosing not to speak. Not yet, not now, because she's letting the distance deepen the bond rather than break it. There's a difference between being forgotten and being remembered in silence. The latter is a slow burn, the kind that travels through the body at night, the kind that shows up in dreams, in unexpected triggers, in quiet moments when no one else is around. That's when the intimacy is felt most. When the world is still and your mind wanders, and it always lands on her. That's how you know she's present. She planted something, and now she's letting it grow. She doesn't chase it. She nurtures it in the dark. There's a seduction in restraint. The kind of intimacy that doesn't beg, doesn't plead, doesn't ask. It simply exists. She lets you feel her energy without explanation. And that energy, it sticks. It clings to your skin like heat. Not aggressive, just undeniable. She's letting you come to her in your own way. But make no mistake, she feels everything. Every pulse, every pull, every internal reaction. She just doesn't pour it outward recklessly. She's not speaking, but she's feeling. She's holding you in the soft places of her memory, not out of weakness, but out of reverence. Because what mattered to her doesn't get broadcast, it gets protected. Her silence is a blanket over the most intimate parts. And under that blanket, things are still warm, still alive, still waiting. Her silence isn't punishment. It's a pattern of emotional discipline. She doesn't fill the void with meaningless noise. She lets it speak for her. And in that stillness, she teaches you how to feel her, not just hear her. Because real connection doesn't scream. It doesn't demand. It doesn't beg. It invites, silently, powerfully, intimately.
There's a gravity to her distance.
It's not emptiness, it's a signal. And if you're quiet enough, you'll feel it, you'll sense it in your bones. Because the bond isn't broken, it's just breathing. She doesn't need to reach out to be present, she just is. And that right there is the kind of intimacy you don't recover from. What if the most arousing thing about someone isn't their body, but their energy when you're not around? What if true intimacy doesn't live in physical contact, but in the way your mind keeps returning to someone's presence, long after they've left the room? That's the quiet power of emotional intimacy. It doesn't announce itself, it seeps in, it takes root, and it shows up when you least expect it, like a breath that catches for no reason or a name that plays silently behind every distraction. It's not always visible, but it's unmistakably felt. Some connections touch your skin, others touch your soul, and when someone touches your soul, they don't have to do anything loud or obvious to stay with you. Their essence lingers in the subtlest ways, in a scent, a sound, the memory of a glance, a rhythm in your chest that shifts when they cross your mind. That is not accident. That is not coincidence. That is someone who mastered the art of presence, not through performance, but through pure unfiltered energy. She doesn't need to show up in your DMs to be near. She doesn't have to speak to be heard. There's a part of her that lives in you now. Not because she claimed it, but because she revealed something in herself that made you feel something in you. That's emotional intimacy, the invisible thread that ties two people in a space beyond words, beyond touch. It's what happens when someone makes you feel safe enough to let go, even briefly, and then walks away, not to abandon you, but to allow the feeling to echo. She's not trying to be unforgettable. She just is. Because emotional presence isn't something you push. It's something you are. She's present in the way she made you feel, seen. She's present in the way her silence still carries weight. She's present in your decisions, in your hesitations, in your desire to relive a moment that may never happen again. She showed up authentically, without needing to impress, and that left a deeper impression than any grand gesture ever could. This is the kind of presence that becomes erotic without being explicit. It becomes sensual without requiring a touch. She awakens something in you that had nothing to do with your body, and everything to do with your attention. She drew you in, not with what she said, but with how she listened. Not with how she looked, but with how she understood. She created a space where vulnerability felt not only accepted, but craved. And now, even in her absence, your body remembers her, as if she never left. That's the thing about emotional intimacy. It bypasses logic. It skips past your defenses. It nestles into your memory and leaves fingerprints on your choices. She may not be speaking, but the connection is still talking. You hear it in the silence, you feel it in the space between distractions. You notice it in the way nothing else quite compares, even if you try to replace or recreate it. That's not about chemistry, that's about emotional imprint. She carries herself in a way that makes the mind do the work. She doesn't need to be loud to be known. Her energy speaks volumes. Subtle, steady, undeniable. When she looked at you, she didn't just see your face. She saw beneath, and when she spoke, she didn't just fill the air. She invited you to breathe differently. That kind of connection doesn't dissolve. It deepens over time, even without reinforcement. She may be quiet now, she may be miles away, but she's in the way you slow down when you remember her. She's in the questions you didn't get to ask, the answers that still live inside your body. She's in the way you catch yourself, rereading old moments like they're poetry, not because you're stuck, but because she touched a part of you that was asleep. And that awakening doesn't close once it's been opened. It stays open.
This isn't about fantasy. It's about emotional resonance.
That strange sensation when someone occupies a place in your spirit, even without physical access. She doesn't text, but her energy texts your nervous system every time the world gets quiet. And in that silence, she becomes more real, more vivid, more alive. She taught you that intimacy isn't always about closeness. It's about presence. And presence, when it's powerful, doesn't fade. It deepens, quietly, sensually, completely. What if real desire isn't about showing everything, but feeling everything? What if the deepest kind of intimacy isn't in the touch, but in the ability to be so full of emotion and still choose to hold it with grace, not desperation? There's a different kind of allure in someone who doesn't perform their longing, someone who doesn't spill their soul just to prove they care. It's not cold, it's not closed, it's a language of control, self-respect, and unspoken depth. She doesn't need to dramatize her emotions to feel them. She doesn't perform heartbreak. She doesn't act out desire. She experiences it deeply within. She holds space for it, lets it move through her, honors it, but she doesn't offer it just to be acknowledged. She doesn't use emotion to beg for attention. Instead, she sits with it. She becomes it. And in doing so, she becomes unforgettable because anyone can show love. Few can hold love without breaking themselves to give it. She's felt the ache, the pulse, the raw ache in her chest when a moment passes and she wants to reach out, wants to speak, wants to collapse into something familiar, but she doesn't. Not because she's detached, not because she's playing hard to get, but because she understands that feeling without control is surrendering power. And the most seductive women are the ones who feel deeply but remain centered in their self-worth. In relationships, we often associate love with proof, with expression, with something seen. But there's a different kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't depend on exposure. She knows that real connection doesn't always look like frantic messages or late-night phone calls. It can look like her lying in bed, clutching her pillow a little tighter, staring into the dark, remembering how your energy shifted hers. It can look like her walking down the street and suddenly, for no reason at all, her breath catches at the thought of you. That's not performance. That's presence. That's someone who doesn't need to externalize everything to make it real. She's a storm you don't see coming. Quiet on the surface, but electric underneath. When she loves, it's not showy. It's sacred, private, intense. The kind of love that doesn't explode. It simmers, and you feel it in the space, in the silence, in the waiting, because she's not putting on a show. She's not dressing it up with flirtation and theatrics. She's just being, feeling, sensing, trusting herself enough not to hand over all her power to someone who hasn't earned her vulnerability. And here's what makes that so powerful. She doesn't need to speak to be felt. She doesn't need to confess to be known. Her energy is her message. Her distance is not rejection. It's regulation. It's her taking a moment to listen to herself instead of rushing to be heard by someone else. She doesn't throw her heart at anyone. She lets it unfold when it feels safe, when it feels respected, when it feels real. She doesn't play small in order to be chosen. She doesn't shrink her sensitivity just to appear cool. She embraces every emotion she feels, but she chooses how and when to reveal it. That's the beauty of restraint. That's the art of being emotionally mature. Because intimacy isn't about saying everything. It's about knowing what needs to be said and what needs to be held with sacred silence. In that silence, she glows. Not because she's hiding, but because she's in tune with herself, with what she deserves, with what she won't compromise on, no matter how strong the chemistry. And that kind of woman becomes magnetic, because while others perform emotion to be validated, she sits in hers to be grounded. You don't wonder if she cares. You feel that she does, even if her lips never say it. She's the one who can sit across the room and create tension without a single word. The one whose eyes hold stories you weren't ready to hear. The one who listens more than she speaks, but when she finally does, every word lands in your gut. That's not withholding. That's embodiment. That's what it looks like when a woman lives in her body, not in her projections.
She feels you in the quiet moments.
And maybe she wanted to say something, maybe she drafted the message, maybe she thought about calling, but she paused. She let herself feel the ache instead of sending it. Because she knows that how she expresses herself matters just as much as what she feels. She doesn't seek comfort from someone who hasn't offered security. She doesn't offer vulnerability to anyone who hasn't made it safe to open. And that's the paradox. The more she feels, the more still she becomes. Not because she's suppressing, but because she's honoring her experience, honoring the sacredness of her emotional world. She's not interested in applause for her pain or a spotlight for her longing. She simply wants to feel fully without giving herself away. What if access isn't always the gift, it's the test? What if the most magnetic kind of intimacy isn't in the constant closeness, but in the way someone limits your access to them and still pulls you in? There is a very specific power in the woman who doesn't make herself immediately available, not because she's playing games, but because she knows she is in a game. She is the prize, the invitation, the moment you crave, not the one who chases to prove her worth. You got a glimpse, just one. A moment, a breath, a shared silence. A slow smile, and since then, it stuck, lingered, burned into memory. She gave you a taste of her essence, not the full plate, and now you find yourself circling the idea of her, replaying the flash of connection, like it was more than just attraction, it was recognition. But now she's distant, not gone, just quiet. And that quiet, it's not rejection, it's confidence, it's sensual discipline, it's emotional mastery. Her intimacy doesn't come cheap. She doesn't hand it over because the vibe was good for one night or because the conversation flowed easily. She waits, observes, feels the rhythm of connection before she sinks deeper into it. She makes you wait, not to test your patience, but to honor her value, because she knows what comes too easily often goes just as quickly, and she's not looking to be consumed. She's looking to be understood.
She's a private garden, not a public playground. She lets you see the petals, but she protects the roots. There's a part of her that stays locked, unless trust is built brick by brick, and that kind of restraint. It's magnetic. The less she gives, the more you crave. The more space she holds, the more you fill it with thoughts of her. That's not manipulation. That's maturity. That's knowing her intimacy is not for the impatient. And while others may mistake her distance for indifference, you feel something different. You feel something different. You feel her presence even when she's not near. You feel her softness even when she's hard to reach. You feel her impact even though she gave you only fragments, because the fragments were real. They weren't performed, weren't calculated, they were true. And truth doesn't need repetition to be remembered. It lingers all on its own. She gave you a spark, but she didn't throw gasoline on it. She let you walk away with your thoughts lit up, your senses heightened, your curiosity burning. That's the art of a woman who knows herself. She understands the difference between physical proximity and emotional permission. Just because someone wants her doesn't mean they've earned her. And so she protects her access like a sacred boundary, not to punish, but to preserve the purity of what she offers. You find yourself wondering if she's thinking about you, wondering if that one conversation hit her the way it hit you, wondering if she feels the same quiet tension building, even in the silence. And the truth is, she probably does, but she won't act on it just to satisfy a craving, because she doesn't treat intimacy like an impulse. She treats it like a contract, mutual, conscious, intentional. The seductive power of limited access is not about withholding, it's about choosing. She doesn't let you in just because you knocked. She listens to the knock. She stands behind the door and listens to what's beneath it. She feels the energy, the intention, the rhythm, and if it doesn't feel safe, stable, or sincere, the door stays closed. That's not rejection, that's self-respect. That's a woman who's not afraid to be alone with her own depth, rather than give it to someone who can't swim in it. And here's what creates the most intimate friction. You've tasted her energy, and now your body remembers. Even when she's not around, your nervous system stays alert, scanning rooms for someone who might feel like her, but they don't. They can't. Because she's not just a person, she's an experience. One that doesn't demand attention, but commands it in her absence.
Her access is her power. She gives you just enough to wonder, not enough to possess. She's not playing hard to get. She is hard to get. Because she's rare. Because she's done the work. Because she doesn't open herself in fragments to people who can't hold her in wholeness. She doesn't unravel for curiosity. She unfolds for commitment. You'll notice that every time you try to forget her, something reminds you. A phrase, a smell, a place. And the reminder stings, not because she left you, but because she never fully arrived. And still, she left a mark. That's the kind of intimacy that lives in restraint. The kind that builds, not by exposure, but by absence filled with impact. The kind that doesn't need repetition to leave a permanent trace. What if the most intimate part of her was never her body, but her mind? What if every time she looked at you, touched you, spoke to you, she was already 10 steps ahead? Not in manipulation, but in awareness. There's a different kind of sensuality in the woman who doesn't just move with emotion, but with intelligence. The woman who doesn't just respond to what's happening between you, but reads it, decodes it, absorbs it. She doesn't react. She studies. She knows exactly what energy is in the room, even when no one's saying anything. She uses her mind the way others use seduction, with precision, intention, depth. Her presence may be soft, but her awareness is sharp. She registers the subtle shifts, the micro-expressions, the tone behind the words. And every time she felt the atmosphere between you shift, even just slightly, she didn't flinch. She felt it. She processed it. She filed it away. Because her intimacy isn't impulsive. It's selective. And that selectiveness is part of what makes her unforgettable. She doesn't flood the space with thoughts or fill the silence with noise. She watches, listens, senses. Because when she gives herself to someone emotionally or physically, it's never random. It's a decision. It's a conscious moment of surrender that comes only after trust, safety, and consistency have been proven. You may have thought you were leading the rhythm, but she was already 10 beats ahead, choosing whether or not to match it. Her intimacy is intellectual before it's physical. She understands energy. She knows what presence feels like and how absence can sometimes speak louder. So when she gives you a moment, her attention, her smile, her touch, it's never casual. It's curated, thought out, embedded with intention. And when that moment is over, you're left not just with the memory of her body, but with the lingering electricity of how she made you feel. That's not chemistry, that's awareness. She can remember every emotional nuance between you, where your tone changed, where your breath hitched, where your eyes softened just for a second. Not because she's overanalyzing, but because she's attuned. That's what makes her intimacy so rare. It's not passive, it's intelligent. You're not just being touched, you're being understood. And when you feel understood deeply, precisely, without judgment, it unlocks something even deeper than desire. It opens surrender. When she engages with someone, she doesn't just give affection, she gives clarity. She sees the truth of the moment, even if you don't say it out loud. She can feel when you're holding back. She can sense when your heart is armored. She can intuit when you're speaking out of fear, rather than truth. And she doesn't shame you for it. She simply stores that information, quietly, respectfully, because she knows connection isn't about forcing depth, it's about honoring it. There's a sacred kind of power in the woman who doesn't rush to touch you, but instead reads you. The one who isn't desperate to be chosen, but deeply curious to understand. The woman who allows the space between you to breathe, instead of filling it with control. She doesn't use words to fill awkward silences, because she knows some silences are more intimate than sentences. She doesn't need to expose every detail of herself to feel close. She reveals what matters, what's real, what's aligned. And in doing that, she makes you feel something different, something that doesn't fade when she leaves the room, something that lives in the subtle echoes of a connection too raw to name. That's what happens when someone engages you from their mind first, not just logically, but emotionally, spiritually, energetically. She doesn't just respond to your words, she responds to your energy. That is why she stays with you. You can try to replace her. Physically, you might. Emotionally, never, because no one else makes you feel that scene. No one else listens between the lines, quite like she does. No one else slows down time with the intensity of their perception. She made you question things about yourself, about what you thought intimacy was supposed to feel like. And now even when she's gone, you still feel like she's reading you. That's her power. Her ability to engage with clarity, not confusion. She doesn't get swept up in moments without anchoring herself first. Her love isn't blind. Her attraction isn't desperate. Her intimacy is not a default. It's a reward. Something given slowly, intentionally, and only when the space between you proves it's safe to open. She doesn't need to chase. She doesn't need to overshare. She doesn't need to overgive to feel valuable. Because she knows her mind is the real seduction. Her presence is her statement. Her silence is not emptiness. It's observation. And in every room she walks into, she's not seeking attention, she's scanning for truth. Because when she finally does give herself fully emotionally, mentally, physically, she wants to know it's being received by someone who knows how to handle her power. What if memory is the most intimate place of all, the one no one can enter, yet someone lives there anyway? What if true connection isn't measured by presence, but by the undeniable fact that someone has taken root in your inner world? She may not be next to you, she may not have said a word in days, but there's a part of her that still touches you. Every time your thoughts slow down, every time your body aches without knowing why, every time the night feels longer than usual, that's the kind of intimacy that can't be faked, and it certainly can't be forgotten. She never needed to be everywhere to be unforgettable. She never had to fill your phone or chase for closeness. She simply showed up once in a way that was so real, so undiluted, so emotionally pure, that the experience branded you from the inside out. And now, her absence is louder than anyone else's presence. That's not accident. That's impact, the kind that doesn't demand space, but creates it. The kind that makes you feel her without even trying. She lives in the most unexpected corners of your day, in the way you pour your coffee, in the way a specific word lands differently, because it sounds like something she once said, in the way your chest tenses when you see someone who almost looks like her but doesn't carry the same softness in their eyes. That's how you know it was never just about her looks or her body. It was about the way she made you feel yourself more clearly, more deeply, simply by being near her.
She touched you without needing to touch you.
That is the highest form of intimacy, and when someone affects your nervous system like that, you don't recover quickly, because what you miss isn't just the sound of her voice or the scent of her skin, you miss the way she made the world slow down, the way the noise quieted when she looked at you, the way you felt stripped down to your core, seen, understood, disarmed. And now, in the silence she's left behind, her presence has only grown louder. She lives in the emotional echoes, in the way you hesitate to open up to someone new, because part of you is still holding space for a connection that felt sacred. In the way you compare even when you don't mean to, not because you're stuck in the past, but because your body remembers what alignment felt like. She didn't try to stay, she didn't anchor herself in your life with promises or pressure. She simply existed in full truth, and that truth lingered. She became a rhythm in your breath, a pulse in your quiet, a story that continues writing itself long after the last page was turned. That's what happens when a woman walks into your life with clarity and then exits with grace. She becomes unshakable. And here's what makes it even more intimate. She's not trying to haunt you. She's not manipulating your thoughts or intentionally weaving herself into your narrative. She's simply being herself. And it's that authenticity, that effortless embodiment that left the deepest mark. You can't forget someone who made you feel things without saying much. You can't unfeel someone who saw through you without needing you to perform. There is a kind of memory that doesn't fade. It sharpens. It grows clearer with distance, not blurrier. That's the kind of memory she became. A quiet force that lives behind your ribs, a whisper of a connection that still feels unfinished. And maybe it is, or maybe it was complete, but just so potent it continues to radiate long after the moment has passed. You remember her not because you want to, but because your soul does. Because she spoke to something deeper than your wants. She spoke to your needs, emotional needs, spiritual needs, the parts of you you didn't even know were starving until she sat next to them in silence and made them feel safe. She didn't beg for space. She earned it. She didn't take your attention. She captured it by being real in a world that rewards performance. And in that memory, she becomes a place. A feeling, a sensation. She becomes the internal response that no one else can replicate. Not because they're not enough, but because they're not her. Because she imprinted on a frequency you didn't even know you were vibrating on until she activated it. So now, even as time moves forward, something about her stays still, preserved, revered, untouched by noise or distraction. And that stillness, it's not a void, it's a reflection, a sacred pause inside you that reminds you of what intimacy should feel like, full, effortless, soul deep. And without a single text, without a single word, she continues to exist in your story. Not because she's trying to, because she simply does. Because the body forgets touch before the heart forgets presence. Because the most unforgettable women are not the ones who demand to be remembered, but the ones whose energy made remembering inevitable.